I graduated from Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine in 1973, and my dad was one of the original founders of WVSOM. I tell the story a lot because it's meaningful to me. When I was in Kirksville, Missouri, there was only 6 or 7 osteopathic colleges then at that time, back in the 70s, early 70s. That's before cell phones and so forth. My dad would call me every Saturday and see how things were going. And so one time he called and I said, "How are things back home?" He said, "Well," he said, "the 4 of us are going to buy the old military school and turn it into an osteopathic college." And I said, "What in the world would you do that for?" And he said, "Well," he said, "there's only a few of us DOs left in West Virginia, I think 60 or 70. And he said, we're all getting older and nobody's coming in. And we have trouble recruiting." He said, "I'm just afraid that when we're gone, there will be no more DOs in West Virginia." And he said, "What we want to do is to get a college, graduate some West Virginia natives, and hopefully perpetuate the profession in West Virginia." And they did, of course, and they graduated, I think 25 or 30 the first year, and now they're graduating to over 200 every year. So it's really a source of pride in my family. I went to Bethany College, just up near Wheeling. Now this is back in the 60s, like 66, 67, and the osteopathic profession in West Virginia was having a hard time. The MDs didn't like them very well. They were having some licensure problems. Dr. Sharp and my dad and another physician was meeting at a hotel in Wheeling. Dad called me and said, "You want to come down?" So I did. And I listened to all this about the troubles they were having and the difficulty they were having getting privileges and recruiting physicians and so forth. And being the young, brash college kid I was, I spoke up and said, "Hey, we ought to sue them. We ought to run public education and public awareness campaigns and make a lot of trouble and give them hell." And Dr. Sharp listened to that for a while, and he said, "Son, you just paddle your own canoe." And that philosophy is kind of our philosophy. I think if you look, you'll see that DOs kept their mouth shut, kept their head down, paddled their own canoe, did an excellent job, and our reputation is sterling because of that. And the reputation of the schools is that way because they've just done a good job. They haven't bucked the system. They've just worked with it, and people see that. I had a medical student who was very bright and very eager and very enthusiastic, who wanted to be OBGYN. And she wanted to do her residency in Charleston. And she was having trouble getting a mentorship or a clinical rotation with an OBGYN. And so I had a good friend of mine who was very prominent in the field, an MD, who was president of the West Virginia Medical Association as well as Raleigh County. And he was one of the leading OBGYNs in the Beckley area. So I called him and I said, "Hey, I got a student who would really like to rotate through your clinic, get some experience." And he said, "Not interested." He said, "The last medical students I had from other schools," said, "were a big disappointment." And he said, "I just don't have time for them." And I said, "I sure would appreciate it if you'd do this as a favor to me." He said, "All right, I'll give her 3 weeks." We sent her over. He called me back in 3 weeks. And I'll never forget, he said, "Don," he said, "about that medical student you sent me." I said, "Oh my God, here it comes." He said, she is the most wonderful student I've ever seen. She's bright, she's enthusiastic, she's eager, she's everything that a student and a future doctor should be. And he said, I'm happy to help to train her, and if you get any more like her, send them over. So she eventually graduated and applied for a residency at CAMC. The head of the department at CAMC said, I will never, as long as I'm alive, allow a DO to be a resident in my department. So Dr. Pulliam and others convinced him to give her a try. And now she is the head of the department and one of the premier OBGYNs in Charleston. And it's funny that so many of our students that have graduated, particularly in the old days when it was hard to get residencies, turned out to be leaders, not only in the MD, but the DO profession. Progressive. The thing I liked about the school was its attitude of being positive, kind of being a little out of the box as far as medical education. I was on a number of boards back in the 80s, 90s. I remember going to an alumni meeting. One of the alumni came up and asked for the microphone. And these were guys that graduated in the first and second and third class. And he said, I am so grateful. I am so grateful to the school for taking a chance on me. He said, I applied to several medical schools and I couldn't get in because I was a non-traditional student. I didn't go through the classic undergraduate school. I was a pharmacist and I was too old and they didn't want me. And he said, this school took a chance on me and now I'm a doctor. And I knew this guy and he's one of the best docs around. And he, as soon as he got talking, there was someone else standing beside him wanting the microphone. This went on for 30 minutes. These guys who I knew were professional, sometimes a little cynical, very unemotional. They were very emotional when they were talking about this, and they choked up and they had to stop talking because they were just so full of gratitude that the school would take a chance on them and let them be a doctor. That's the thing that really sticks in my mind about the school, and that is kind of their attitude. It's, we want you to succeed and we'll help you to succeed.